We're looking at graphing a function rule. This is from 2.4 in the Math 1 workbook. And basically, a function rule, you could think of it as an equation, and they're basically saying, I want to produce a graph for this function, Okay? And so I'm going to do this by creating a table of points. And so basically, it goes back to our idea of inputs and outputs. X is our input, Y is our output. So I get to make up X's, plug them in, and find out what their corresponding Y's are, or the Y that goes with it, and then put those on a graph. Right? So as a general rule, you typically want to pick X's, that are, probably want to pick a couple negative ones, and then pick a couple positive ones, and probably 0, 2 is in there. It's a good idea, because this one's pretty straightforward, but some of the other graphs can be confusing. If you don't pick some negatives, things can be a little bit weird. You won't get a good picture of it. So I'm going to go and create a table of points. So I start with my inputs. I call those X's. Okay. I'm going to plug them in to the equation. Okay. And then out's going to pop in output what I'm going to call Y, and then I'll have a relation, which is a fancy way of saying a coordinate point. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and produce some points here. Okay. And for this particular one, I'm going to pick about 3 points. I'm going to pick a -1, a 0, and then a +1. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in -2, -2, 0, and +2. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and work these out. So I'm going to say, okay, so watch how I plug this in. I'm going to plug it in for the X. Okay. So you can see here I'm going to plug in a -2. All right. So then I'll go ahead and multiply those two, and that's -4 plus 4, and that's 0. Okay. So that's a 0. So that means the relation, or the coordinate point, when I plug in a -2 is I get a 0. Okay. So now I'm going to plug in 0, setting it up for substitution. Okay. Plug that in there. And I'll multiply, and I'll get 0 plus 4 is 4. So now if I plug in a 0, I get a 4. Okay. And down here, the last, I'm going to plug in a 2. Okay. And I get 4 plus 4, and that is an 8. Okay. So then I get this relation 2, 8. Okay. So hopefully that's enough to create my line. So I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to draw myself a graph and try to graph these points. Okay. It's always nice to have graph paper if you can. Okay. Line a little squiggly there at the end, but so I'm going to go ahead and graph the point -2, 0. So there's -2, 0. That goes right there. 0, 4. So I go to 0. I go up 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then 2, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay. So you can see here that's what the graph's going to look like. And so this one actually is going to be linear. All right. And so I'll go ahead and connect my dots. And I always do it from left to right. Okay. And I get something like that. All right, moving on. So one thing we need to understand is it doesn't matter what x's we pick, they'll all work if it is a function. And so you're going to see here there's kind of an issue with this one. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set it up the exact same way. I'm going to set up my table. Then I'm going to get out y's, and from that I'm going to be able to get a relation or a coordinate point. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and pick -2. Okay. And I'm going to get 1 over 2 times -2 minus 7. Okay. So some people are going to get turned off a little bit by the fraction, but it's not that big a deal. I just put this one over 1. I'm multiplying a fraction, so I multiply the tops and the bottoms. So it's -2 over 2 minus 7. That reduces to -1 minus 7. To make this a little easier, I'll add the opposite, and I get -8. Okay. So, all right, now I'm going to pick another one, and watch what happens. I'm going to pick, say, -1. All right, so I'll set this one up and say 1, -1 minus 7. And then I get -1/2 minus 7. You go, that's kind of annoying because I get common denominators, and that's true, and that's not that big a deal. But for the sake of time, what I'm going to do is say, you know what? This 2 had the fraction go away. How come this 1 didn't? And the issue is, you look at this denominator, okay? And any number that's a multiple of that, I'm talking about this, so like for 2, it's 2, 4, 6, 8. They're all going to reduce. So I want to pick numbers here that reduce, that divide by 2. So I'm just actually going to ignore that one. Okay, I'm going to ignore that one, and I'm going to go with, say, well, I'll pick with 0 because 0 is always kind of nice. So I go ahead and say, well, anything times 0 is 0, so that's just -7. So I have the coordinate point 0, -7. And I'm not going to pick 1 or 3. I'm going to pick 2 because it divides. Okay, so I'm going to plug in a 2, put that over 1, I get 2 over 2 minus 7, that's 1 minus 7, all right, and to work that out, I go, okay, that's just, I can add the opposite, and that's -6, all right, so now I go 2, -6, okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and graph those points down here. And I can see most of my stuff is here in the negative here, so I'm going to kind of draw my graph mostly going down, just so I can fit it on this same piece of paper. All right. So I'm going to graph those points that I picked. And I started with -2, -8. So -2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. 0 and -7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and +2 and -6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. And then I plot those and go, hey, this is also linear. And I'll go ahead and start from the left and graph it toward the right. And there's my graph.